Today, I'm going to show you how to make this baseball display case that can hold all kinds of things, like trophies, game balls, rings, and a whole lot more. Stick around and check it out. So this project starts out like many of my other projects, on the ground with my trusty track saw. And the part that I'm cutting right now is the backboard that's going to have the American flag on it. I cut it to length and width on the ground, and then I went up to the workbench to cut the angles that will make the home plate shape. And if you want the dimensions for any of these parts so you can play along at home, I'll put a link in the description for the plans. The next thing I did was put a nice even burn on all of the background. Once I was done burning, and after a little bit of sanding, I taped it off to stain the union. I apply a liberal coat of the stain just to make sure to get complete coverage. After letting it sit for a bit, I wiped off the excess to get the darkness I was looking for. And then it was time to cut the parts for the frame and the shelves. And I went ahead and burned those too. Now that the blue stain was dry, I went ahead and taped off for the white stripes. You definitely want to add extra stain here because the white will show through better the thicker you put it on and the longer you let it sit. And once you let it sit for a while, wipe off the excess there too. Now if it's been a while since I've last used my table saw sled, I like to go back to my boot shining days and put a coat of paste wax on the bed of the table saw so the table saw sled will glide nice and smooth. The next step is to cut the mitered edges for the outside of the frame, so I set my table saw blade to 45 degrees and cut the top two corners, being careful not to waste any material. Once that was done, the white stripes were dry, so I could go over and finish up the background flag by doing the red stripes. Same process as before. When the red stripes were dry, I used a template to spray on the stars. Now this template was a kit that came with some smaller versions of stars that had all 50 of them, but it just didn't look right. So I taped off a section of stars and just did what looked right to me. And here's what the background looked like when it was all stained up and dry. The next step was to put a couple layers of clear coat on it just to give it that little extra bit of shine. And while I was at it, I did the same thing for all the frame pieces and the shelves. Once that was all dry, the next step was to attach the frame to the backboard, and for this I just used some glue and probably way too many brad nails. For the sides, I married up the top 45-degree angles, marked where the bottom angles were going to be, and then took them over to the table saw and snuck up on that line until it was perfect. Now as you're putting your brad nails in, you want to make sure and go straight into the plywood, because if you go at an angle in any way, it could come out the front or the back, which can be really hard to fix. When it was time for the shelves, I cut 45-degree miters on the ends of one piece and then set it in there. I put a couple balls on there just to kind of see how it laid out until I liked where it was, and then I brad nailed it into place. For the other two shelves, it was just a matter of sneaking up on the fit and then trimming the width of each board to make sure it didn't stick out of the frame. Once I got them brad nailed into place, this is what it looked like. Then it was on to the backboard and the big frame. Now I wasn't initially sure exactly what I was going to put in the background. I had three options. One was just a black background, which is what I ended up going with. Then I had a white background and also a cork board, all of which you could stick push pins into. So I swapped them out until I got one that I liked. I used pocket holes for the frame sides and bottom, and then just used butt joints for the top because you won't see it. I decided to use plywood as a backer for the black boards, just so it would be able to support the weight that could be put on this thing. I cut the black boards exactly to the same size. And then used spray adhesive to stick them together. I put a bunch of weight evenly distributed across it, and while that was drying, I put a coat of spray lacquer on the frame and touched up the home plate. Once the backer board was dry, I put a line of glue all the way around the sides, inserted it into the frame, and brad nailed it into place. The final step was to secure the home plate to the backer board, and to do that I measured to make sure it was centered, made marks around the edges, and then drilled holes just inside those marks so that when I drill in through the backside they're going into the frame of the home plate. Now, because this is probably going to sit flush against the wall, I countersunk these screw holes. And that was it. She's all done.
Now let me walk you through it before I show it to you with everything on it. The shelves are for game balls or maybe rings that the player has accumulated over time. You can also put dowels in the front of this to hang medals if they have any, and I'll include that in the plans. And something else I'll include in the plans is how to hang a bat from the end here in case they have a bat that has sentimental value. Maybe it was what they used for their first home run. I also picked this backboard so that you can use push pins to attach pictures or tickets to their games or whatever you want. All right, let me show you how it looks with everything on it.
Here's what it looks like with just the home plate. And here's the full thing. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you next time.